Hello, my friends. Recently, I got to eat at a Nigerian restaurant in Boston's Nubian Square. I also had some other African-related experiences as well when I was there, so today I'm going to be sharing that experience with you all. Last month, the city of Boston connected its train system to New Bedford, the whaling city, which is where I live. And yar, you heard right, lads and lassies, we do be hunting whales in these parts. Of course, we can't harpoon them for that sweet, sweet spermaceti no more, so now we just go out in boats and stare at them whales. Menacingly. Anyway, during the time of writing this video, the new train ride to Boston is free on weekends, but the free rides will supposedly end soon, so I won't be able to get free rides for very long. I don't exactly travel much, but if you enjoy this travel video and my other African educational content, please consider contributing to my new Patreon page, where you can help fund my videos and other projects. So when I arrived in Nubian Square, the restaurant wasn't open yet, so I visited the local library first. It's a really nice looking library, and considering its size, the selection of African-related books was pretty decent. I flipped through a handful of books while I was there and photographed some titles in case I wanted to get one of them later. But I didn't borrow anything because I didn't want to carry too much, and also, and more importantly, by the time I finished reading one of these books, the train ride likely won't be free no more. So financially, it would be a better idea for me to just straight up buy these books online later if I choose to read them in full. I happen to have recorded video of me flipping through some of these books. If I don't use all that content in this video, I may upload the rest of it to my Patreon. And since the part of Boston we're in is called Nubian Square, I figured the library book I should make most note of in this video is the one titled The Barkal Temples by Dowes Dunham. If you don't know, Jebel Barkal is in the modern country of Sudan, aka ancient Nubia. And although this book is a bit old and therefore may have some out-of-date info, a large amount of the book's text is likely still good information. Plus it's got plenty of interesting images to look at as well. But the best thing I can tell you about this book is that when I looked it up online, I discovered that it can be read freely on archive.org, so we can read this one anytime we want. Besides that book, I of course looked at other African history and African art history books while I was at the library. Once it came closer to lunchtime, we headed over to the Nigerian restaurant. The place we visited is called Suya Joint, and as you can see for yourself, the place has a pretty nice African-themed ambiance to it. That said, I do have some notes on how the decor could be less generic. The wooden relief carvings on the wall are tourist artworks. Stuff that gives you African vibes but have no traditional cultural significance. On the authenticity scale of African art, which ranges from 1 at the very top to 9 at the very bottom, these rate very low, either an 8 or 9. The paintings are also using a modern style not reflective of any specific tradition, though I will say there is a charm to these modern styles, so I get why people buy it. I'm just letting you know though that this is not authentic. These are styles that have largely developed to sell to outsiders. The paintings leading to the bathroom are a different style, but I feel like I've seen this style in tourist art as well. This isn't me saying these artworks are bad, I'm simply explaining to you that they are not traditional. However, that said, the content of some of these images do reference real aspects of culture. The main paintings that decorate the restaurant have Adinkra symbols from Ghana, and this painting leading to the bathrooms features Kuba patterns from the Congo. The bathroom itself is nice looking. For example, I like the mirror, though that too could have referenced African art more, but either way it's a nice mirror. And behind the sink are framed 2 pieces of jewelry. Those pieces could easily be more authentic than the paintings we were looking at, though I'm not sure since I don't study jewelry too often. Anyway, back in the main room of the restaurant, one can notice a nice display of baskets on the wall. These certainly add a more authentic feel to the place, but the baskets on the column obviously don't, since one of them, quite literally, says tourism right on it. One more painting I'd like to talk about is the one painted directly on the wall itself. It depicts a generic African hut, which is fine and all, it's all cozy and stuff, but again, this is a missed opportunity to show something more unique and culturally specific, like for example architecture from the Hausa or the Yoruba or the Igbo or others. Again, I'm not trying to insult this place, it's got good vibes and good service, but as someone who studies African art, obviously I'm going to want to point out this sort of stuff. If you want to see an African restaurant that does a better job of reflecting specific authentic African cultures, then you can check out my video about the Shaka Zulu restaurant in London. The visuals there are really cool, though I should note that there are plenty of modern visuals mixed in there too, but I would not call it touristy, at least not in the typical sense. However, I've never been to London and therefore I've never eaten at that London restaurant, whereas I did get to eat at this place, the Suya Joint, and I'm happy to report the food was very good. For my meal, I ate a popular dish called Egusi, and my brother who came with me ate Ogbono. According to him, the Ogbono reminded him of curry. More specifically, the taste was kinda like halfway between Indian and Chinese curry. Now for me, I'm not honestly sure how to describe the flavor of Egusi, but it was very good, and I'm glad I paid extra to have some chicken legs added in there, because the flavor of the Egusi and the chicken combined is fantastic. So with that in mind, I suppose I could describe it as being a savory sort of soup. Both meals came with yam fufu. Fufu is a mostly neutral flavored food that is meant to absorb the flavors of the main dish. Online, you may hear people compare fufu to mashed potatoes, but in my experience, it tastes more like white rice. And as you can see in my video, I tore off pieces of the fufu to scoop up the soup. There are traditional African spoons that one can use for their meal, but the most often used utensil in Africa is one's own hands. So if you do want to use a spoon for your African soup, then yes, you can certainly ask for one. Both Egusi and Ogbono are prepared by multiple ethnic groups in Nigeria, and unfortunately, the waitress didn't know which ethnic group's style was reflected in the restaurant's particular versions of these dishes. But considering that some of the other meals mentioned on the menu are specifically Yoruba dishes, I think it's a decent guess that the versions of Egusi and Ogbono that we ate reflect the Yoruba recipes for these meals. And if you're curious, this is how the menu describes these meals. The Ogbono is made with crushed African mango seeds, onions, herbs, and Nigerian spices which make it a draw soup. It's also cooked with pieces of chicken and fish for added flavor. The name draw soup refers to the nature of the very thick broth which draws out of the bowl when eaten. The write-up for Egusi on the menu reads as follows: a stew thickened with African ground pumpkin seeds, contains spinach and pieces of fish and chicken. And although it's called a pumpkin here, Egusi is technically a melon. I'm guessing that it's sometimes called a pumpkin rather than a melon because it's not sweet like a fruit, despite it looking like a watermelon from the outside. Besides its use in soups, Egusi seeds can also be eaten on their own as a snack. P.S. I took some leftovers of the Egusi home, so it wound up being 2 meals for me, and I figured I'd mention that if you want to reheat your fufu in the microwave, you should break it up into smaller pieces so that it'll heat more evenly. After the meal, we headed to a nearby bookstore. That's right, more books! The place is pretty nice looking, though its selection of books was not as good as the library's was. Unfortunately, I didn't see any art history books, though maybe they were hidden somewhere in the shop, and though I definitely saw some history books specifically about Africa in there, most of the shop's focus seemed to be on African American history. And of course I do study that as well, but as you know, my primary focus tends to be on the continent. Another noteworthy thing here was the posters that were showing important black women in history. And lastly, there was some original paintings that were decorating one of the store's walls. The best one of the bunch, in my opinion, is this one over in the corner of a woman whose face is half covered with abstract shapes which seem like they're forming a mask for her. And clearly this painting is about black power, since the word power is quite literally emblazoned on her head wrap. Wish I had gotten a better photo of this one, but oh well, you can't expect everything to go perfectly when you're traveling. 2 other standout pieces include this smaller painting of a crowned figure who is set in a colorful geometric background, and this moody painting of a man on a bridge. It kinda reminds me of the famous painting The Scream by Edvard Munch, because it too is a moody painting of a man on a bridge. much. Though unlike the external scream of Munch's painting, this painting, if it has a scream at all, would be an internal one. Having said all that, maybe my brain is just making this comparison because the last episode of One Piece I watched very deliberately referenced Edvard Munch's painting. So yeah, it might just be on my mind for that reason. There was one other place that we visited that day, and we came across this last one by accident. When walking by some storefronts, we noticed a poster advertising African art for sale, and the place we walked into, oddly enough, turned out to be a convenience store, which, as many of you would probably agree, is very weird. Normally, if you want to buy some African art, you go to an antique shop. But yeah, it turns out that this particular black-owned convenience store just happened to have some African art. And as expected, some of it was just tourist stuff, but there was some stuff in there that was higher on the authentic scale. So yeah, I actually wound up doing a sort of impulse buy while I was there. But I think I may show that object that I bought in a separate video, and I can probably use said future video to explain that African art authenticity scale that I mentioned earlier. Now, although I would have liked to have explored Nubian Square more, I'm still recovering from a foot injury, so I didn't want to be walking around all day. So I left well before sundown. But there definitely is more to see, because on the walk back to the train station I saw an African clothing store. And of course I would have liked to have checked that out too, but if I had done that, I would have risked missing the train back home. So that was my trip to Nubian Square in Boston. Please subscribe and click the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.